It's a tradition. Before we get Phil out, we get him fired up by chanting, Phil, 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 Phil. It's Punxsutawney Phil!
Welcome back to Privy. Privy is a podcast about bathrooms, recorded from my home bathroom. I'm your host, Hunter Hoover, and I love bathrooms. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Yeah, just thank you for joining me on this bathroom journey. If you're listening to this, we've done this a lot, and one of the things that comes up regularly is I'm always in need of guests on the show. So if you hear this, listener, I'm going to put this little plug at the beginning of the episode. If you're like, man, I got a bathroom story to share, or even if you don't, even if you're just like, you know what, I think it'd be fun to sit down and talk to Hunter a little bit. Shoot me an email, privycast@gmail.com. I would love to sit down via virtual space or in person. Sometimes if it works, we can try to get together in a bathroom together. You know what I'm saying? And just kind of talk bathrooms. So let me know if you'd be interested in that. I would love to see about getting you on. I'm able to try some new things. Just to spice things up. I'm always going to try new stuff on the show, but some of them takes a little work to set up and some time to plan. But it's that time of year. It's February. Love is in the air. Football is in the air. Presidents are in the air. But none of that really matters. We don't give a good gosh dang about one single bit of one of those. Valentine's Day? Yeah, right. Super Bowl? More like Dillhole Bowl, bud. I don't even know if I can say Super Bowl. Stupid Bowl. There, I fixed it. President's Day? We've only recently got a president that I think we need to be talking about. So you know what I'm saying? But it's February. There's much to be excited for, and it all comes at the very beginning of the month as we kick off the month with the best holiday February has to offer. Happy Groundhog's Day, everybody. We made it. Happy Groundhog's Day, February 2nd. Now, the point of this episode's release, hopefully you celebrated Groundhog's Day both publicly and privately. Because of the nature of how I record the show, this show is recorded before Groundhog's Day. And so I really, truly do not know at the point of this record. So either Punxsutawney Phil did, in fact, see his very, very thick shadow, and we're in for it, or he did not. And I can't remember which way it goes. It doesn't really matter. If you've never seen the Groundhog's Day festivities that happen in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, I would encourage you, pause this show, go over to YouTube and type in Groundhog's Day 2025 footage and just watch. I obviously will be, at the point of this record and at the point of listening, will have already tuned in the day of. It's on a Sunday this year. Mark your calendars. I'm marking mine. But happy Groundhog's Day, everybody. We're celebrating our favorite holiday in February. And here on Privy, every year to celebrate Groundhog's Day, we take a look at one of God's great creatures. And even more importantly, the interesting things that come out of those great creatures. Poop. We got to talk about their poop. We've looked at a lot of creatures on Privy. Go back and check those episodes out. They usually come out around February 5th. But this year, we are observing a new creature. But before we talk about that very cool creature, we have to do a short history lesson. You know that I can't just jump right in and tell you about our creature for this year. We've got to do an ADHD, full-blood, 4-alarm, festive February Groundhog's Day deep dive to the background of this animal and what makes its poop so special and unique. Indonesia is a set of islands in Asia known for some time as the East Indies. While these were inhabited by Hindi and other native Asian peoples and later Islamist groups, Europeans, what are they doing? What's he doing? He's a peon. Europeans officially didn't make it to the region until 1512. Portugal won the race to reach Indonesia, and in doing so made an alliance with Spain and set up a number of key trade ports and outposts in the Spice Islands and in other parts of the region. 20 years prior to their setting up outposts in the East Indies and Indonesian continent, Spain and Portugal and other various settlers and explorers attempted to reach this region by sailing not east, but west. Portugal, I don't know if it's Portugal. This part of history, it's not important. But under the funding of Spain, I believe, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue, 1492, to reach these Indies. The Indies he were seeking were the West Indies. He hit land. It wasn't the West Indies. He didn't make it. And in doing so, he discovered America for the European continent. The rest is history. But this episode isn't about Columbus. Columbus used to have a day in October where we celebrated him. But then, because history has shown him to be doing some nefarious deeds, we're not allowed to celebrate him anymore. Even though he did a very good thing in discovering the United States and the North American continent, that all must be undone and we must do away with it because he made a terrible, terrible error. Now, I'm not condoning his mistakes, but that does not negate the fact that he discovered this continent for Europe. But we're not doing Columbus. Columbus did enough already. Rather, competition from European nations for control over the Indies, in our context, the continent and the islands of Indonesia. These would play out over the course of years and years in that section of the world. Two groups that would come under great conflict in the region were Portugal and Spain. And they would be up against the Dutch. It seems this conflict in the East Indies spilled over from the 80 years war between the Dutch and Spanish, which began decades earlier. The Dutch, not liking their enemies having influence in such an amazing region for trade, launched a series of expeditions, which resulted in their control of the region, the East Indies. The result of these conquests led to these lands and islands being called the Dutch East Indies. Here, a chief operating entity was the United East Indies Trading Company. While they traded in the ever-lucrative spices of the region, such as nutmeg, buttcrag, pepper, sneezy pepper, clove, had some clove gum recently, big pass. Like, it's just awful. Not a fan. And cinnamon, big fan of cinnamon. I freaking love cinnamon. Like, Cinnamon Toast Crunch is so good. It is like top shelf cereal. Gosh, I love cinnamon. I'm such a big fan of cinnamon. I'm an absolute cinnamon fiend. My favorite toothpaste is a cinnamon toothpaste from Crest that you can't buy anymore. Trust me, I've tried. I've written the Crest Corporation. I've written them, and they told me we don't make it anymore. And I'm like, here's an idea. Flip and make it again, because it's the best toothpaste you've ever made. And you're a gosh dang idiot for canceling it. I've tried. It's gone. But while these spices that grew and were traded in the spice trade in this region, the Dutch settlers and the European colonists to the area decided to bring in other crops from outside the region of Indonesia to grow them there, to give them a little more variety and a little more spice, if you will, of what they were able to trade from the region. These new crops and products that they brought in include tea, cocoa, tobacco, opiate, just straight up opium. Just growing opium in the wild, and coffee. And as it relates to our concerns on the show today, while all of those are very good things to be maybe not opium, I don't know, we can maybe do without that one. But our attention is going to be turning to the coffee, as coffee was not native to Indonesia in the East Indies. Coffee was brought there. It turns out coffee grows best between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. It has to be a pretty damp and tropical climate for coffee to grow well. It needs to be warm, and it can't be freezing very often. As a result, it thrived in Indonesia, but it was brought there. It wasn't from there. However, something that was not brought in, but was there all along, was the Asian palm civet. The Asian palm civet is native to the region of Indonesia. This is a cat-like mammal with a long, stocky body, usually with shaggy grayish hair, and often civets, especially the Asian palm civets, are going to have a white stripe across its forehead and white around each eyes. He's like a reverso raccoon. You know what I'm saying? And honestly, like, this thing looks like a weird long polecat or some sort of like strange type of tree cat. You never know when you're going to stumble on a weird polecat. You know what I'm saying? But they're neat. They're a neat creature. An Asian palm civet is native to Indonesia. Civets are generally solitary creatures, like pubescent teen girls. And they're mostly nocturnal and seem to sleep for big parts of the day, kind of like pubescent teen boys. The civet will mark its territory being a lone ranger. He's a real lone ranger. He likes to pray and spray. Marks its territory through scent marking glands on its bronchiolio, or urine, pee-pee, feces, poo-poo, or the perineal gland. That's that stinky squirt gland on the butthole of the civet. And while none of these markings and these habits of marking territory are atypical of many mammals, here in a pod where we discuss bathroom and poop-related topics, it does bear noting. The civet, it'll squirt one out to mark its territory. Asian palm civets feed on berries, pulpy fruits, and like, who doesn't? Like, who doesn't feed on pulpy fruits? I will sup a pulpy fruit so fast. They're so good. I would decimate some pulpy fruits. I did. I decimated a pulpy orange this week. I sucked back pulpy fruit so fast. And I got to tell you, I think it did give me diarrhea. Because there was one day, either that or I caught a weirdo bug, but there was one day where, I mean, I ate just a globe of an orange, just really snacked down an orange. And it was like the bathroom job the next morning. It was like all the pulp had just flown straight through me. They eat a fruit called the chiku, also known as a soap apple, which doesn't help me out much. I don't like the flavor of soap. I do like apples. Big fan of apples. But the soap apple. They'll eat mangoes, and again, same. Big fan of mangoes. And they'll eat a fruit called the rambutan, which is kind of like a lychee. It looks like it's like got these weird spindly little hairs on this lychee fruit. It's kind of cool. Civets are also known to hunt and eat small animals and bugs. As we're aware, however, what goes in must come out. And boy, outside of my orange adventure, I have output some clam farts this week. My wife made a big bucket of clam chowder, and I ate on that, Jack, for like 4 days. The atmosphere was noticeable. But the civet cat's digestive system is unique from other animals, specifically from other mammals, which was only studied in a big way in the last 5 to 10 years. He's snacking down all these pulpy fruits. But before we get into why a study of the digestive system and poop of the Asian palm civet was conducted, I think it would be helpful to talk about the results of their findings. I'm going to save you the messy details of this research project. The study comes from the National Library of Science. It's a big read, and it was published in 2020. In it, in short, the team studied the chemical genetic makeup of the digestive system and digestive fluids from the Asian palm civet to see how it differed from those of other mammals which had had studies done. And things were mostly the same. And I say mostly because as they rooted around in that snoot, as I like to say when people start digging around in poop, one of the things that they found was a high concentration of the gut bacteria called Gluconobacter. Gluconobacter is a bacteria in the acid bacteria family. This bacteria is a big fan of sugar. Got a real sweet tooth, this bacteria. It likes sugar-rich environments. And like sometimes me too, you know what I'm saying? I want to snack down something a little sweet. I get you a little sweet on. The glucose, that's the glucose part. Gluconobacter, gluco, that's the sugar part. As they studied the civet's poop and digestive tract, they found in the gut biome 2 specific strains of Gluconobacter. Gluconobacter fraturei and Gluconobacter japonicus. Not sure. I tried to look up what like distinction those have versus other forms of Gluconobacter. It seems like there's about 15 different types of this, and these might be a subspecies. But suffice it to say, if they have any amount of Gluconobacter in a large amount of it in its digestive tract, there's going to be something interesting with sugars. These Gluconobacter bacterias made up 66% of the microbiome of the civet cats that were observed. In other animals, specifically mammals studied, including cows, dogs, horses, people, monkeys, hamsters, mice, and pigs, there was almost no Gluconobacter or sugar bacteria. So it seems this specific sugar-loving bacteria is specific to the digestive system and digestive tract of civets. And the Asian palm civet is no different than his counterparts. So what? Like, What makes the Asian palm civet so special that we would select it as our featured creature for our Groundhog Day extraordinaire special episode this year? Why? Why the Asian palm civet? Well, to further appreciate this, we have to jump back into our history lesson. Back out of the world of science, which scares me utterly, and to the colonizing of Indonesia to get to the point. As was noted, one of the crops which were planted in Indonesia to help vitalize the ports and access they had to various sources of income there was coffee. If you didn't know, coffee does not look like what it looks like when you buy it from the store. When it grows, it doesn't look like that. Coffee is actually a cherry. The coffee cherry grows in tropical climates, again between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. Dutch colonists planted coffee throughout Indonesia because they figured out it would grow there. These interactions resulted in the Java Wars, wherein the natives and other peoples of the region fought back against the Dutch colonizers of Indonesia. When that happened, the Asian palm civet gained a new source of food: coffee cherries. The civet cat began to eat coffee cherries probably sometime in the 1600s or 1700s. After the Java Wars, the Dutch colonizers needed to revitalize their economic income from the region. They had taken a financial hit paying for the wars and warding off indigenous peoples from their farms. To revitalize the income they gained, they began using a system called Kulturstelsel, or a cultivating system, to help increase the production of their crops. Things were tough in Indonesia for the Dutch at this time. Nothing was allowed to go to the waste. In fact, on these Dutch colony farms, you weren't even allowed to pick the fruit for personal consumption anymore. You know, when I go berry picking, and boy do I go berry picking, I love to just get just full brown bear, just get my bucket full of blackberries. And one of the joys of berry picking, if you've never been berry picking, any berry, we used to go huckleberry picking when I was a kid in Montana. One of the joys and one of the benefits of going berry picking is what I like to call mid-pick snack. And that is where you're snacking down a few of these berries. You know, you get like 6 in the bucket and maybe 4 in my mouth. You know what I'm saying? And you gotta have berry picking snack while you berry pick. It's just common sense. It's the way God intended it, like truly. But the Dutch, and on these Dutch farms, you were not allowed to pick or consume any amount of the crop for yourself. You couldn't eat any of it. It was off limits. All of what was grown had to go to production for sale because things were so bad for the Dutch farms in Indonesia after the Java Wars. Everything had to be harvested and sold to help pay for those wars. That, and sometimes you start to find coffee beans where you least expect them. As the story goes, one of the Dutch coffee farmers in the region noticed beans of their coffee in the droppings of what was found to be the Asian palm civet. Now remember, they're desperate to pay off debts, and nothing must go to waste. They did then what every rational person would do who found coffee beans in poop on their farm. They decided to root around in that snoot, dig the beans out of the turd. You know, you do what you do with coffee beans. Process them along with all the other coffee beans. It wasn't until years later that the European settlers, thinking the Indonesian natives had stolen cherry coffee crops from them, asked where they were getting all the coffee beans they were using to brew the coffee. It doesn't grow naturally, so where were you getting it all? The natives then explained that they too had been foraging for coffee beans from the poop of the Asian palm civet. And they were the ones, because they're not mixing it with other plant-grown coffee, they were the ones that found that this coffee was actually smoother, less bitter, and it was reported to have a better flavor. Nothing makes a cup of morning brew taste quite like a cat turd. But that's especially the case when the Asian palm civet is the cat, and the chemical makeup of that cat's digestive system are such to break down the sugars of the cherry and alleviate some of the acidity of the coffee without damaging the bead inside the pit. The Dutch plantation owners decided they too would cultivate this coffee and sell it for a premium. It was highly sought after in Europe after this point, and people would pay a huge price for it. But anytime you have something that's worth a lot of money, people, every single time, if you find something that's worth money, there's always going to be somebody who's going to come up with a fake. Turns out, if people will pay extra for coffee that came from a cat turd, they'll probably believe you if you tell them the coffee you got a normal way came from a cat turd. Fakes were everywhere, and the Kopi Luwak, called as such from Kopi, poop, and Luwak, the name the Indonesian people have for the Asian palm civet, fluctuated in popularity. In 1991, a man named Tony Wild went wild. Flippin' buck wild is what he was. He was stanky. But he went to Indonesia, where he was introduced to the Kopi Luwak, the coffee. He brought this infamous poop coffee home to the United Kingdom, where the desire for the coffee was off. Word spread like wildfire. Word spread like shotgun diarrhea, if you know what I'm saying. Kopi Luwak was featured on the Oprah Winfrey Show, and who the frick cares about that lady? Sorry, Oprah, not really. I'm sorry that you're super rich and famous and have all this power, but somehow America's still against you. Go figure. In 2007, the Kopi Luwak coffee showed up in the movie The Bucket List. But with rise in popularity, the supply couldn't keep up with demand. And so they did what every capitalist and market economy does. They increased supply. Natives to Indonesia began trapping this Asian palm civet to produce the coffee more often. But the conditions for the civet were less than great, and this led to the new awareness of conditions for the civet. Remember, this is all because the Asian palm civet's digestive tract is perfectly long enough, has the right chemical makeup to break down a coffee cherry seed just right in order to produce a coffee bean that is apparently less acidic. And while the story of this coffee is one that is made up of colonialism and imperialism, misuse and mistreatment of animals, and the product of a number of scams and wars, there are movements also to counteract these, including making the treatment of Asian palm civets and other animals more humane. Likewise, the market for the coffee is limited. And there's been some research done on how to get the same results through conditions in a lab. With all these fakes, they had to come up with a way of making sure that you had authentic civet poop coffee. They have electron microscope scanning, but these prove ineffective because you have to scan such large amounts at a time. Nowadays, it is formally recommended to avoid buying civet coffee either because it is fake product or because if it is real, it is very likely produced in questionable ethical conditions. All this because Asian palm civet's poop had coffee beans in it. While I recommend you avoid it, I'm here to tell you I did not. I tried Kopi Luwak months ago. My coworker's husband had brought some home from a work trip, and she shared it with me. And whether or not the coffee was legit and actually had been dug out of the poop of an Indonesian tree cat, I tried it. And maybe it was the glucobacter, or maybe it was my brain trying to move past the fact that I sipped down the bean juice of something that had been inside the butthole of an Indonesian tree cat, perhaps months earlier. Or perhaps my brain wanted it to be as good as I had heard. But I'm going to tell you, it was a good cup of coffee. I don't know if I'd ever buy this myself. It seems a bit steep, especially when the difference was not like when you're talking, $50 for a pound of these beans, and you can get like a pound of beans for $8 to $10 of just regular, not crap coffee. I'm gonna go with the cheaper one, even if it's got a little more acidity to it. It's a good cup of coffee though. But all this makes me wonder. Is there other animals who could create a poop coffee byproduct of this nature? And it turns out, I'm not the only one who's had this thought. In 2021, anthrozoologist, which is like a person zoologist, weird title, Jess Hooper, founder of the Civet project, collaborated with two artists to test out this theory. And in doing so, it produced a scientific paper where they detailed the findings that later produced 80 grams of what was called human coffee. That's right. Coffee that had been digested and then, oh my gosh, we are depraved. Sometimes, this is depravity. This is human depravity on display. Through the consumption of coffee and extraction from human feces. The science is, it was different from civet coffee. But it should be noted, coffee was produced. And the artists, especially the one who ate and then digested and then shazzed and then rooted Scoot to dig out the coffee from her poop, touts that the civet coffee is no longer the rarest coffee. Her poop coffee is. Good for you, lady. I want to say I'm willing to try it. I got to figure out how to get coffee cherries. And I'm worried that the pits will get stuck in my digestive tract. There's a lot more. In Jurassic Park, there's a line that says, they were so busy thinking about whether or not they could do it, they never stopped and asked whether they should. Yes, coffee was produced. And apparently, somebody was willing to pay for this rare cup of beans because it went at auction for $566 for 20 grams of coffee beans that came out of some lady's butthole. That much for civet coffee would go for about $50. So yeah, I'm here to tell you, there's 100% chance that those coffee beans were purchased by a pervert or a sexual deviant. 100% guaranteed. This year on Privy, for Groundhog Day, we celebrate the Asian palm civet. We celebrate the Asian palm civet whose digestion tract and is made up and is sized just perfectly to digest a coffee cherry in such a way to produce a desired acidic coffee bean. The Asian palm civet is our animal for Groundhog Day because his poop brought us a pop culture coffee phenomenon, flooded the market with scams, and reminded us all that if money can be made, people will ruin it. And they'll dig through a cat turd to do it. Asian palm civet, thank you. This brings us to the end of another episode of Privy. Happy Groundhog's Day again, everybody. I hope you enjoyed. Go look up an Asian palm civet. If you've tried Kopi Luwak civet coffee, let me know. Send me an email, privycast@gmail.com. Or if you're listening on Spotify, leave me a comment. I'd love to hear that. And I'd like to hear what you thought about it. I thought it was pretty good. I think you just got to kind of get over that it used to being a turd. You know what I'm saying? Leave us a rating and review. The 5-star options are preferred, and we'll donate $1 to Wounded Warriors and Living Water International for every rating and review left. You can rate us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts, we will read that out on the show. We would love to hear from you. 5-star options are preferred. There's a little bit of a store thing out on the website if you want to go check that out. I'm working on some stuff. Stay tuned. If you want some Privy merch and you got some thoughts, email me, privycast@gmail.com. You can follow us on social media. It's at Privycast. You can follow me. I'm at Owlet7. If you're brave, you can follow Randy Bowles, at Randy Bowles. And yeah, enjoy your February. Now that the best part of it's over, enjoy your February. This brings us to the end of another episode of Privy. Keep pooping in the free world. Own your stank. Wash your butthole. And now, as always, don't forget to flush.